1913, an expedition returned to Sweden from Australia. It brought back a unique collection of films, animals and artifacts which has not been seen for over 80 years. The expedition members never spoke to their leader again. His name was Eric Mjoberg.
Dr. Mjoberg is completely confused. He lives in a flat surrounded by ethnographic material and weapons. The patient refuses to eat and is in a psychotic stage. He tried to throw himself out of a window. When asked where he is, he says he is in a country outside of this country. He says that they are coming after him and that he needs a gun or a rifle.
I could with horror see my own body lie there, pale, lifeless. Had I at last experienced something supernatural?
In 1910, Eric Mjoberg was the leader of the first Swedish expedition to Australia. Part of its mission was to find out if the Aboriginal people were the missing link between ape and man. The repercussions of what they did is still felt in the Kimberley today.
The Swedish government had some Aboriginal remains from the Kimberleys. The stuff that they took away from up here was taken away back in 1910, 1911 by a Swedish expedition. They'll find them at the cave and these other tree, hollow log, skeleton and everything. They're going to even take it away overseas.
I've been fascinated about him my whole life. Being an explorer, going all the way to Australia, which was really far away from Växjö, where I grew up. And he had these nightmares that he was pursued, the Aboriginals pursued him and wanted to kill him.
At the time, there was of course an interest in physical anthropology and all these racial ideas that the size of the skull and so on could tell something of the character of people. Australians were much in the focus because there were of course speculations about they being the missing link. There were also ideas about the Aboriginal people being descended from Neanderthals. To Mjoberg, to him, the Aboriginal people were kind of part of the animal world.
Eric grew up on the west coast of Sweden, and that part of the country was famous for being very strict in the religious sense. His father was a priest in the conservative group within the Lutheran Church. The father died rather early. Then they had to move out of the house because a new priest had to move in. And they were poor, they didn't have any money. It was a quite hard upbringing for him. But Eric was very bright. So he was the only one who got to study. So I think he had a lot of pressure on him.
Eric Mjoberg was a brilliant student with a particular fascination for the structure of insects. He completed his university studies in 1903. After graduation, he supported his mother and his 3 sisters by teaching high school biology. But what he really wanted was to explore the unknown.
Well, explorers at this time were very much like pop stars or superstars today. I mean, when they came back, there were enormous celebrations. In Sweden, we had, of course, Nordenskiöld, who went around Asia. Sven Hedin was one of the biggest names because of his traveling in Tibet and Central Asia. So there were examples of successful explorers. So that must have been an inspiration also for people like Mjoberg.
By 1909, inspired by the example of these brave explorers, the determined Mjoberg managed to finance his expedition through the Swedish Museum of Ethnography and the Travelers Club, a bunch of enthusiastic armchair travelers keen to hear about the latest discoveries from the far corners of the world.
Mjoberg was in his late 20s and he was the leader of the expedition. All of the expedition members were quite young. Mjoberg himself was an expert on insects, but he covered a much wider area, collected all kinds of animals. They also brought back human remains. He brags about it a bit. Then we had the ornithologist Rudolf Söderberg, who studied the bird life up there. There was also Birger Rosborg. He had problems drinking too much, so his idea to join the expedition was to get rid of this habit, actually. And we have the taxidermist, Cyrus Vidal. He wrote a fantastic diary. Laurel was the ethnographic collector.
Det här är en bråkdel av de 2000 föremål som du hade med dig hem från Australien 1911. Vi tog förstås ut en bumerang.
När det träffar en naken inför en kropp så river det upp hela magen på folk.
This interview was recorded in the 1970s, when Laurel was 91. He was, at that time, the only surviving member of the expedition.
The trip to Australia was definitely the high point of his life.
He was very much a man, powerful and strong, and I'm sure it doesn't surprise anyone to see this extreme daredevil. Very aggressive, very successful. It was almost like he had the spirit of a Viking, strong, and out of that a kind of a cruel appearance. If you see him at this peak of his youth, you would know that he would do some great things.